What up, folks? I love that part of the stream. I get super amped, and I usually get a smile from the guests. So I got yet another one. I'm super pumped. Welcome to the show, Sold. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Doing good. It's kind of a snowy day out here, so just traversing that a little bit.
Snowy?
Yeah, sort of over the whole winter weather, but doing good, man. I can't complain. Doing good.
Yeah, it's typical SoCal, San Diego, 7 degrees and sunny, baby.
I'm a little jealous, I'll be honest.
Most people are, but it ain't cheap to live here, so
Yeah.
there's that part too.
Yeah.
So I want to do a couple housekeeping items midlife. Been talking to some really cool companies, Aura Exchange, the Foundry. You might have heard them through the plague. They're doing real world assets and tokenized real estate. Just talked to Doc on an intro call yesterday. He's a fantastic human being. Can't wait to have him on the show. Maddie, I say this every time. I promise you, he's still alive. Sold, that's my co-founder, but he has had to unfortunately get a pretty intense day job, so his timeline and schedule is limited. But we are trying to target the first podcast with Maddie back on around the beginning of April. So that's what we're doing. I just announced today too. Please, if you watch this within the next day or so, please vote on my tweet that I sent out maybe an hour or two ago about timing for spaces. What we're going to do is sometimes Maddie might be able to come. Sometimes he might not be able to come. Obviously, we need Twitter exposure. I refuse to call it X, by the way. Twitter still sounds right. But we need Twitter space exposure. What I cannot bring myself to do, though, is do your typical space where there's a lot of people on stage. Sometimes people talk over each other. Listen, there's some great space hosts out there. I don't think they're usually my vibe, but I'm going to bring the MLC vibe to Twitter Spaces. So we'll be doing the video podcast and we'll be doing spaces, same format, bringing awesome people on like Sold, having deep, genuine, honest conversations about life, love, the pursuit of happiness, leadership, mentorship, entrepreneurship principles, and of course, Web3. So that is kind of the update of what Mikey G's doing, where the brand's evolving. I also just had my second masterclass, gave it to the DSK DAO community, got some really good feedback. I'm actually in partnership now with Blue, who is the owner of DSK DAO. We're really trying to figure out how to make a tokenized Web3 based education platform. I think there's people doing it, but I think there's opportunity to make it better and do it in a unique way. So we're working on that as well. So lots of things going on, man. Super, super exciting. But before we get to the world famous midlife crisis question, we like to do the formal introductions here. So Sold gave me some super awesome alpha right before the show, and we're going to do the introduction now. So he has been in cannabis for years. Dude is kind of a serial entrepreneur. He's been part or owned or co-owned multiple companies. In addition, he's been part owner of a fashion consultant company. In addition, part owner of a wellness company. And then the unique, interesting fact that we used to ask, and I totally forgot to ask this when we came back, but I like this one. Sold was in college and he said, you know what? Screw it. I'm dropping out. I'm selling everything and I'm moving to Japan. And so he did that. And that kind of entrywayed his into the cannabis industry. Anything else there, Sold? Did I miss anything? Any other color you want to add to your intro? Are you feeling good?
No, I'm feeling good. I think that's a good introduction to it all.
Awesome. Love it. So with that being said, here it is, brother. World famous midlife crisis question. How did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? Please give me Star Wars episode 1, 2, and 3. I know that is not the real order of Star Wars, but we say that because people don't know. Not everyone knows what Star Wars is, believe it or not. But what we mean by that is episode 1, your childhood influences, mindset, people that might have influenced the way that you think and live today. 2, professional career. 3, Web3 journey, intro into Web3, current ecosystem and what you're doing and what the future looks like for you. So let's have it. I cannot wait to have this conversation, man.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you for having me on here, man. Appreciate the time and the invite. I'm excited for it. Been
100%.
looking
I'm
forward
really
to it
glad
for
that
the
you're
last,
here too.
yeah, I've been looking forward to it for the last 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
yeah, intro about myself. I was born and raised in Michigan, right around the Detroit area. Lived out until I was about 11 years old in Michigan. My mother is an artist, somewhat of a prolific artist. Started to gain more notoriety as I got older, but
Nice.
her medium is oil painting and
Okay.
also sculpting.
My
So,
random note, my grandma was an oil painter for University of Chicago, and I think some of her work is still in there.
oh wow, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful medium.
Oh, yeah.
So I always had that influence growing up of the artistic side.
Right.
And my father, he really is the definition of a serial entrepreneur.
Right.
He was born and raised also in Detroit, not in the best circumstances. His mother didn't have very much money. His father was out of the picture pretty early. And he was raised in like a foster home type situation. So not the best upbringing. But, around 15, he actually hit the road on a motorcycle. I guess, back then when he was around, you could actually get on a motorcycle at about 15 and ride across the country and, the police weren't stopping you
That's
and
amazing. I love it.
weren't asking questions. So I had the upbringing of both of them. I have two brothers and a sister. They're all older than me, so I am the youngest child. They are stepbrothers and stepsisters, so from a different mother. But we've never really truly seen it that way. But
Right.
so grew up in Michigan, and at 11, I moved out to Arizona, which was like a big transformation in my life moving out there. It's kind of like where I see my life like really starting. Back when I was younger, like I used to kind of get in a lot of trouble. Tying into the graffiti thing, like I remember spray painting people's like rocks and walls, like at the age of like 9.
At
And
the age of 9? I like
yeah,
that.
kind of a funny story. I was riding my bicycle and there's a little bit of this orange spray paint on it. And it was one of our neighbors' houses, actually. I feel bad about this stuff, but he pulls up and he's like, "Yeah, someone spray painted my rocks here. Do you know what happened?" And me being the naive kid, I'm like, "Oh, no, I have no idea." He's like, "Well, there's some orange paint here that matches it on your bicycle. Like, you sure you don't know?" Like, "Ah, no, I don't know what you're talking about." So, yeah, I used to just be like a little reckless and get into trouble when I was younger. I feel like I was just kind of like lost in a sense, and I don't know. I always had like a lot of energy.
Right.
Um, so it was like a way of me expelling it and wasn't always in the most constructive manners.
Right. Right. You say something interesting there because and I don't know where this comes from, right? Because I was the opposite when I was little, right? It wasn't like my parents were like really hard on me or never told me not to like um have fun and explore, but I had this like internal thing of like I didn't want to get in trouble. So like I was always holding myself back from getting in trouble. What are your thoughts? Because you just mentioned it a little bit. I didn't know if there was any other thought there as to why you chose to go kind of the other way and just, take your I don't know if it's angst or whatever you felt out in a different way. I always find
Yeah,
that fascinating as to why.
reflecting back at it, I think it was just a bit of carelessness, not
Right.
being aware of how it was affecting other people or how like my
Mm,
actions could not necessarily harm people because I would never harm anyone like that. That's a
right,
big
right, right.
no in my book. But even just like destruction of property or spray painting
Yeah,
walls and things of that nature. And I just never really thought about the implications of it and how
right.
it could affect other people.
Yeah.
And I always just had a ton of energy, going a million miles a minute. And I feel like that was just one avenue that I kind of took that out in.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense because there was for sure obviously friends like when you were young that were like they just didn't have a great home life, right? And they took it out that way. But there were people like you're describing, right? And I had buddies too, like, there would be a new neighborhood that was being built near us. And it was more just he was funny. He wasn't being like angry or mean, but he thought it was funny to put an axe through garage door, right, on a brand new house, and, like, when he did that, I was terrified. he thought it was hilarious, right? It's just interesting to me how people, because I get the like troubled life ain't great taking it out that way. But yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. Couple of things. Your father, so at 15, just goes across the country, says he's serial entrepreneur. Talk to me
Mhm.
a little bit more about that, and what you saw him do, kind of skill sets or mindsets did you think got from him?
Yeah, so he didn't have me till he was a bit older, so,
Okay,
of course, at that time, I was not around, but as far as, like, skill sets and mindsets that I've gotten from him, quite a bit. When I was younger, I was always held up to a super high standard. I mean, I still think I am.
right,
That's sort of how my parents are, and one of my brothers is an attorney. He doesn't practice law anymore, he now owns actually his own company as well, another entrepreneur,
right,
and my other brother is a professor at a university, so I had both of these people kind of like, this is what we expect you to be, this is sort of like what you're doing, so
right.
the bar was always set, like, super high,
Mm,
and I think, in a way it's been detrimental to me, but also in a way it's always pushed me to keep going. And in some instances, like, not be satisfied. So it's like, even though I was doing great things and people from the outside be like, wow, this is this huge thing you're working on or have done, have accomplished. And me in my
right,
head, I would be like, I got to keep going. It doesn't feel like enough or much or,
right, right. And yeah, you say a couple of interesting things there. One, I recently wrote a tweet, I don't know, week or two ago, about this struggle, right? Because I have a 6 month old. I still have a full time day job in corporate America,
okay.
but I love building this podcast company on the side. And there's this constant struggle of security, and you hear most entrepreneurs, and they're like, you can't make it unless you quit everything. But then I always go back to like, well, am I happy, and do I have the things that I want,
Hmm.
right? And currently, yes, right? And so if my answer is yes, I'm okay with that, but it's the hardest thing in the world to not go on Twitter and say, "I should be doing more. I should be a better person, or I should have so much more money." I'm assuming that maybe is part of the, you said, to your detriment. Can you talk about what you think the detriment part was? Because again,
Yeah, for sure.
what's your parents um put on you, and the expectations have put on you is great, because you have started multiple companies. You've done a lot of things that people wish they could do but never have the courage to do. But there's a cost to that, right? So
Mhm.
can you talk about that?
Yeah, as far as the detriment goes, looking back at it now, and I feel like I've grown a lot, specifically in the last year, and been
Right.
changing my life around a lot, and got more in touch with myself and my emotions, and so on and so forth. But back then, it was a detriment because I was never satisfied, and I
Mm,
could be doing something that from the outside looked like a great accomplishment or amazing, but to me myself, it just kind of felt like, okay, now what's the next thing? I need to keep going. I need to keep going. And
right.
a story that specifically sticks out of my mind when I started my first business, which was actually, and hopefully I'm not hopping too far into
No,
episode
no,
two.
no, it's
I,
totally
I, I
cool.
guess stop me, but
Yeah, no, no.
I had started so when I got back from Japan, I had started a medical marijuana academy, a school,
Uh-huh.
and it was a weekend long course that taught people how to grow cannabis legally in the state that I'm in. There was a doctor that taught part of the course, and a botanist, an attorney, and essentially we covered all layers of cannabis
Right,
and how can someone can actually start a legal legit business doing it. And I remember one day, we had the most signups ever that we had for the course. It was
right.
an expensive course; it was like $500 a person. And I remember telling my father, and he's just like, "Oh, that's it. There wasn't more." And like that was kind of like the thing I was battling with and dealing with for a lot of my life is
Right,
always like needed to be more, or the bar was
right.
always needing to be higher.
And looking back, or currently now, right? Do you think you can be a successful entrepreneur without that mindset?
Yeah, I think you can. I think definitely you can because I know some friends that are, and I don't believe that they've had the same mindset.
Right,
But me myself, the way I always thought about it, and I think this is really what pushed me hard and pushed me to become somewhat successful, Is I
Yeah.
would always say if someone else was in my shoes, would they be sleeping? They'd probably be sleeping less. They'd probably be working harder if they had this opportunity, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of people that are in those type of situations that
Right.
are, and they're my competition. So
Right.
that
Right.
would always keep me pushing forward and going. And I wouldn't try to like focus on the successes or like accolades. I would just try to keep my head down and keep pushing forward because I feel like if you get too lost in that and like lost in the weeds in a sense, as
Right.
far as that goes, it kind of clouds your vision and it makes you get comfortable. And
Right.
I think
Right.
being comfortable potentially, of course, is a nice feeling and a good thing, but I think there's a time and a place for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing, amazing insight, and that's going to make a fantastic clip. Because it's interesting to me. Uh, Obviously, all kind of founders or self starters like you that have been on this show. Um, and even though the principles are the same, right? Hard work over a long period of time, taking risk, not being comfortable, type of thing. There's so many different ways to get there. So I think it's interesting to hear your story and how you did that.
Yeah, I
One
think
thing.
and
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say too, just to throw this in there, I think the risk is what holds a lot of people back. They're scared of failure. They're scared of
Yeah.
things not working out. Like
Yes.
in your sense, sometimes, people say you have to quit everything and focus on one thing. I don't think that's the case. I think you can do both until one eventually works out. But
Yes.
a lot of people are scared to take that plunge, and they're
Yeah.
scared of ridicule, and they're scared of people judging them. So inevitably, that holds a lot of people back.
Yeah. I mean, even this, right? Like what we're doing right now. Um, I can't tell you how many I've started giving this masterclass on how to create a professional podcast, right?
Mhm.
And the amount of people that come to me and are just like, "How did you do it?" And I was like, "Well, you just got to do it, right?" At some point, they're like, "Well, I'm kind of scared and petrified," and I'm like, "Well, I'll tell you this, man. Even to get to the point where I've have now the reputation enough that, most of the times someone's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of you," or "I saw you." And so that intro conversation's a little bit easier. But in the beginning, man, it was like, "Who are you? I don't care what you are doing. Have a good day. I'm too busy." The too busy, right?
Yep.
But you just don't get there until you try. And then that's the other thing I think that comes up, and I would love your advice on this or thoughts on this. So many people, and you can ladder up, but let's take it for the podcast route, for instance. Well, I don't know what I'm good at, and I don't know what to talk about, right? Or ladder that up to just bigger thing in life of I don't know what I'm good at. And I
Mhm.
think the best advice that I have for that is just you have to keep on trying things.
Yeah.
What else are you gonna do? Like, I think there's a lot of people that for some odd reason see other successful people or see people that have found super passionate things like I have with this podcast that fortunately in my mind, I think I found something that I'm naturally good at, but also love, which is like the holy grail, right? They're like, well, how did you do that? And it's like, well, there's a combination of self-awareness and just trying until you find it. What are your thoughts there?
I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, you have to keep trying, right? And there's going to be a lot of failures along the way, no matter what. I mean, I feel like a lot of people look at something like, say, even an actor, a musician, or a famous NFT artist, or a top podcaster, and they're like, how did they get to that spot? And they think they'll start trying to do it themselves, and they'll have a little hiccup along the way, or a few things go wrong, and a lot of people give up. They truthfully do. I mean, I've
Right.
even been in that position where I'm like, man, this is difficult. Like, it's not going as quick as I want it to. And we're in that age of like instant gratification where everyone expects everything just to be instantaneous. And it's a really unhealthy mindset because nothing is. And of course, sometimes people get lucky. Sometimes you meet the right person at the right time. And of course, that helps and helps elevate you a lot quicker. But really, it's
Yeah.
that persistence and just grinding, like grinding in the trenches and just
Yeah.
posting something and getting 2 likes or 2 followers. And you just keep going and going and going. And that momentum slowly builds. In some cases, it builds quicker than others, but it's really
Yeah.
about building the momentum. And then the harder part is keeping up the momentum once you've built
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the other things I said specifically in the podcast, context of content creation in general, right? Or spaces is my favorite one, right? You get all these Web3 people and they're like, wag me, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna grow my bags, and I'm gonna do it by grinding. And then they have a podcast, they have a space for multiple hours every day of the week. I'm like, guys,
Yeah.
that shit is not sustainable. Nor are you actually telling me that you're going to bring value Monday through Saturday for
Mhm.
3 hours a day. That humans cannot talk that much about one thing,
No, it's
right?
intense. I mean, I've seen people do it multiple times, and it's you burn
Right.
out. So eventually, you're gonna burn out.
But yeah, so burnout's one of them. But I think the point I'm trying to make is uh, you hear a lot in this day and age and culture is just grind and you'll be successful. And that there's a misinterpretation of what grind really is, right? And grind, yes, grind, but on the right things. Don't just do work because you're like, oh, if I do work, I'll be successful, right? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Any thoughts there? Yeah, so you agree. Uh, sorry, I was I was saying,
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to intention.
right, exactly, exactly.
Yep.
Right intention. So let's go just a couple more things of childhood or at least one thing. We talked a lot about your dad and got into the entrepreneurship. I love that stuff, as you can tell. I'm really interested in your mom though. Uh, because I was impacted when I was little as well because like I told you, my grandma was a prolific oil painter. Um, and when we would go visit her, like I always got to paint with her, and I thought it was the coolest thing. My mom and dad were not really into art. But talk to me about having a mom that is now, getting recognized for art and growing up with that mindset.
Yeah, it was amazing. It really fostered, like, my creative side and showed me because of my father was always, like, business, 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 but with her, it showed me there was this whole other aspect of life, like creating something that's not necessarily a company, but something that's, like, beautiful in an artistic side, and it's such a different type of creation.
Right.
Um, and I just remember, like, when I was younger, I'd, wander up to her art studio and just sit there sometimes for hours just watching her paint. She'd set up an easel for me and a canvas, and I would paint myself. Be it I was never very good at painting, and they looked quite childish, but there's a whole avenue for paintings that look like that as well. So,
Right, right.
um, but yeah, it was great inspiration for me, and I feel like it was the perfect balance growing up for what I do now, having both like a parent that's into this artistic, more so like spiritual embodiment side, like a hippie, quote unquote. Honestly, is like how I would have seen my mother when I was younger.
Yeah, right, right.
Um, she went
So
to, like, Woodstock when she was younger, so
right, my dad hitchhiked to Woodstock.
Oh, really?
He's told me that story a bajillion times.
That's
Um,
probably a pretty wild story, though.
I can only yeah, I can
Yeah,
only imagine.
yeah.
So one of the things that I also think is a really interesting conversation, and because you grew up with this, another thing I think people inherently think they're creative or not creative. I actually am from the camp that I think everybody is creative. It's whether, again, you work at something. If you want to become a good painter, you have to paint, right? But people, unfortunately, especially in this day and age, like I think you're cast so young as, oh, you're a math guy, or you're good with words, or you're going to be a creative person. What are your thoughts about that growing up with a mom that was an artist?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, I think people are sorta, like, cast into these certain roles or positions based on others around them, or kind of, like, based on what they do.
Right,
And I've even felt that type of way with, like, my business. It's like I've built this huge thing, and now it kind of, like, defines me in a sense to a lot of people,
right,
which is, like, what I've tried to pull away from a little bit with doing this art, and tuning into this, like, creative side. But I think, everyone has it in them, and whether it be, like, music or painting
right,
or being creative even with a business, like with designing
right,
packaging and with social
right.
media stuff. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to tap into it.
Mhm.
Not everyone's gonna enjoy painting or being a painter, but I think there's a lot of ways to tap into it, and I think it's super healthy and it's needed. It's a great release, and it opens up this whole other portion of your mind that's often
Right.
not used.
And so you said, kinda how you interpreted growing up with your mom. What I'm interested in is, like, again, kind of the mindset. What do you think, like, those qualities that she instilled? Because it seems like, obviously, from your dad's, And she had this too, which is more of like an entrepreneurship mindset that is like, it's never enough, keep on grinding and striving. As far as quote unquote, maybe creativity or the influences from that side of the family,
Mm.
what do you think that how do you think that impacted you?
I think it had a huge impact. I think I didn't realize it as much when I was younger, how much it had impacted me,
Right,
uh, because I wasn't, like, super mindful when I was younger. I kinda just,
right,
like, went through the motions, I feel like, a lot of times, and
right,
that's changed as I've gotten older, but, I mean, it led me to eventually doing art and becoming an artist, and what was amazing about it is I had all these tools, like, within my house, so if I ever did wanna paint or explore, like, my creative side, it was always available to me right there.
right,
And, my mom's painted a bunch of beautiful paintings that were hung in my parents' house at all times. So art was
right,
always a huge part of my life growing up. My father's also really into art, and they had multiple artistic friends too that would come over. And so sometimes I'd be just a fly on the wall to these super interesting conversations that I think really did have a huge impact on me and led to me being very creative, like with packaging design and designing like specific strain stickers, because I actually do all that within our company right now as well. So I'm like manage all the packaging, design all the
right,
packaging, and et cetera. So yeah, I think it was very impactful on me. I think both of them were equally impactful. And now, as I've gotten older, I've kind of been tapping more into the artistic stuff. And I don't want to say stepping away from the business because it's such a gigantic part of my life. It'd kind of be impossible, but
right,
definitely tapping more into the artistic side and then like merging the both because really being an artist or running a career is also a business. A lot of people I think that launching an NFT or something, it's not necessarily a business, but it really is. I think it's the proper way to look at it.
yeah, if if you're doing it right, and we can talk at that at nauseum later. But so the last thing, kind of the childhood, and I think you said something interesting. And I actually, when I talk about how the podcast evolved too, is you said you were around it a lot and you were a fly on the wall, and not necessarily that you were even doing anything, but they're just observing and having it as part of your life, even though you don't realize it, it's actually impacting you. And like you said, later on in life, and I use the same example um, of when we first started, quote unquote, we actually started video game streaming before the podcast, right?
Okay.
Uh, and we had, I mean, hundreds of hours, if not thousands, of nobody in chat, right? And so me and my co-founder got very good at being in front of the camera and being able to talk when we didn't have much to talk about. Uh, what I didn't realize at the time is it prepped me for being able to host a podcast in a relatively easy way because I was just so much more comfortable. But at the
Mhm.
time, I thought I'm wasting my time, right? Uh, do you can you relate to that, or does that
Oh yeah.
kind of sound similar as the creative thing is like you just didn't realize how much of an impact it was having?
Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time, but what you were speaking on, I can certainly relate to. It's like when I first launched, the name Sold1 and started the Twitter page and everything else. I mean, I think I had like 20 to 50 followers for like quite some time, for at least,
Right,
like maybe it was 2 months or something. And no matter what I would post, and I'm not sure if part of that was like the Twitter algorithm or not, because that
right.
also hinders new accounts,
Yep,
but like no one was interacting with it, no one was seeing it. And it does become super discouraging,
right,
when you're doing something to get people to see it and no one's looking at it,
right,
it gets discouraging. But that's when you have this inner dialogue with yourself and you're like, look, nothing's great's created overnight. Nothing great happens quick. Nothing good happens quick. And it takes this repetitive waking up and doing it and doing it and doing it and continuing to work on it. And that always has helped me because even still to this day, I can get discouraged, like looking at what I'm trying to do now with ordinals, and it's a
right.
completely whole different community. It's a whole different subset of people. It's very competitive.
Yes,
And yeah, there's days I get discouraged right now, to be honest with you. And I'm like, wow, like what am I trying to do here? It's going to be challenging. And what if it doesn't mint out and all these other things? And then, I step back and I zoom out and, I realize it's all a learning experience and it's all part of this bigger process. And I think, if you're intentional and mindful and you have a good purpose behind what you're doing, like, you're trying to do something good for the world, and it's also at the same time, which you had touched on, making you happy. I think that's so important. Then I think things kind of tend to work themselves out. But it also takes a tremendous amount of work. I think some people hear that and they're like, oh, so I can just sit around and eventually, this great opportunity is going to come knocking. But it's no, you
Right.
really do have to put in a lot of work as well.
100%. Um, yeah, and the how am I trying to say it? I can't formulate what I really want to say in the correct way, so we're just gonna move on. See, I told you I'd screw the podcast up before you did.
No, no, it's fine.
No,
Maybe
we'll
you'll
move on. It'll come back to me eventually. I know it will. It's an amazing thought. It's just gone. And I drank a lot of alcohol in my 20s and early 30s, and the brain cells sometimes just they vanish.
right.
Uh, so,
Yeah, I
so
think though, and just to finalize what we were saying about my mother, I think, when she first started, of course, she had started painting probably when I was around, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. So
yeah,
something she had started relatively new. And of course, at first she wasn't very good either, but I watched her transform from that into an artist that was actually getting sold, and
mhm,
sculptures were featured in galleries. So it just showed me that anything's possible. And if you really do work hard and you try, that truthfully, really, you can do just about anything in life you want.
right. Nah, I love it, man. I'm already excited. So pumped, and we're just ending episode 1.
Yeah.
So episode 2, like, actually, we talked a lot about parents and mindset too. Anything else to add? And we can talk about it as you're going into
Mhm.
more your professional career when you quit college and moved to Japan, because I can't wait for that story. But um, sports, were you into video games? I think you mentioned skateboarding. Like any other things that you were super into that kind of
Yeah, a
passionate
lot.
about?
So I played soccer all throughout high school on like a competitive team.
Yeah,
Was never great, but I didn't start, so I was like the bench warmer. But I would get into the games and play. So played soccer, played tennis. I was actually like really good at tennis, and I just didn't like it, so I quit.
yeah,
Skateboarded, snowboarded, BMX, rollerbladed. Played drums. I was actually in a high school band. We played the high school dance. So I was a big drummer for a long time.
nice, dude. You just went through like everything that people want to do one of, and you just like listed all of them. I'm assuming that again comes from just that drive that kind of was instilled by your parents. And then combined with the curiosity of your mom being creative. Like it almost seems like the melt of both of those mindsets being taken out and just like exploring things. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and I'm the type of person too, if I'm interested or something, I like it. Like I become like hyper focused and pretty much like obsessive about it. Like I just don't stop. Um, so I feel like I can learn things quite quickly, but also sometimes I get bored with them quickly. So I've kind of hopped around a lot. But yeah, I was very active when I was younger. Like I said, did a lot of sports, and really the art stuff didn't start until around high school.
Yeah, that makes sense. So take me through this really interesting story, which is kind of like the evolution in episode 2. At what moment was there a specific moment in college where you're like, "This is it. I'm done. I'm just selling my shit. I'm moving to Japan," or was it kind of a slow brew over time?
So that's a good story, actually. It was a slow brew over time. I felt like I went to college just because it was like at that time the thing to do. Like it was accepted. My parents expected it.
Same.
And I didn't know what the hell I was doing at the time anyway. So it's like, yeah, sure, I'll go to college. Why not? And I kind of just did the motions. And honestly, I'd go to class probably half the time. I remember once showing up to a class and they had a test that day and I had no idea and
Right.
miserably failed it. So I never really took it serious. And, looking back at it, it's unfortunate because I wasted some time doing that, was kind
Right.
of lost and not sure what my purpose was.
Right.
So fast forward to my junior year of college. And, at that point, it's like, all right, I'm getting close to being done essentially here. Still don't know what I'm trying to do. I was going for business development
Right.
and I really wasn't learning much that I can apply to like to day-to-day life. So the whole college thing is like a whole nother avenue. I think it's a big waste of money for a lot of people. I think for some people, if you're going for something very specific, like trying to become a doctor or get an engineering degree, I think it could be incredibly beneficial. But I think for a lot of people, it's just kind of going through the motions. And it's a great way to get in a ton of debt and then start your whole life, negative 100 grand plus.
I'm
Um,
there, man. I mean, fortunately, I did get a graphic design degree, so I had some sort of
Nice.
skill set.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it gets tougher and tougher every year to argue hundreds of thousands of dollars for a liberal arts degree, right?
Mhm.
Although Benny and I had this, the legendary League Sanos founder, uh, there was a caveat. You can go get a general degree if it's at an Ivy League school, because the
Mhm.
network that is opened up to
Yes.
you at Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Cornell uh, might be worth that amount of money for
Oh,
sure.
yeah, that's priceless. I mean,
Right.
when people say your network is your net worth, I mean, it's so true, and in
100%.
crypto especially, I mean, if you don't know people or have some type of in, it's really hard to break through, but I guess really that goes for all walks of life, you know?
It does, and we talk about this a lot too. It's amazing to me the amount of people that just don't interpret what social media really is. All it is groups of people, right?
Yeah,
But they think it's all about this, like, there's this like digital facade of like likes and oh, my content needs to be top tier. And it's like, you know what? Guess what? The influencers and the people that have the large followings, they're actually talking to each other as well. It doesn't just like
yeah,
magically happen. Like there are groups of people that are talking that are
mhm,
trying to build a social presence. Who would
yeah.
have thought?
And that's a challenging thing, I think, that me and you didn't necessarily grow up with, but people are nowadays, and we're dealing with it nowadays because we're on
Right.
crypto Twitter, is that
Yep.
everything is like a number. So say you do a post 2 weeks ago and you get 50 likes. Now you do a post today and you get 35 likes.
Right.
You're kinda like, "What happened here? Am I doing something wrong?" So on and so forth. So it's easy to get in your own head because everything is, like, numerical and measured now.
Yeah.
Uh, it's
It
just interesting. I don't think it's necessarily very healthy, to be honest.
Oh, it's not healthy at all, and the other thing that actually angers me in Web3, and anybody that watches this in Web3, I could probably piss them off, but, uh, again, we know it's this hype machine, right? And why I do what I do, and me and my co-founder do what we do is because I genuinely do believe these conversations and, touching on the real human beings that are trying to build something special, will win out in the end. But what's incredibly frustrating to me is when I know, people and I include myself included that have like a really interesting format.
Mhm.
Uh, what I think do is high quality content, uh, but but the minimum following that some hyped project is looking for is like 50,000 followers. Well, it's like, well,
And it's like, you
where?
could just go out and buy those. And sorry, I have
Right.
someone, delivering a grocery order here, so I'm just making sure that they're bringing in everything
Now you
correctly.
can step away if you want to. Are you all
No,
good?
no, no, I don't have to. Sometimes they just text they don't have an item, so if I'm looking at my
Yeah,
phone, that's the only
yeah.
reason. But,
Yeah, so but the point is I think, 1, it can be discouraging, and you can go down a real dark rabbit hole and, beat yourself up. I
mhm.
honestly think because that doesn't bother me as much, I don't know why. I get more frustrated at seeing the people that have the numbers, a lot of them fake numbers, getting the credit, and I'm like, "I know I can do a better job than that," and it pisses me off.
A
But
and,
whatever.
I think I if when you stay at it and you do have a good intention behind it and you have a good show such as yourself, I mean, since we first started talking, I've listened to every episode now that you've had, the
No,
most
thanks,
recent
man.
ones since we started talking, and, yeah, it's just a unique way that you do it, you really dive into people's stories, and it's very interesting, I love the long format, but, eventually, there's always a break that happens, you'll meet the right person at the right time, someone
Right,
will send you
right,
a DM, and then all of a sudden, it's just, like, crazy, like, everything just
right,
takes off,
right,
so just
right.
gotta keep going till that happens, and it's a slow grind until then, and then all of a sudden, it's like everything all at once.
Brother, I've been going for two
Really
and a
exciting.
half years. No one's stopping me at this point.
I love it, I
Um,
love it. But
and
yeah, so go ahead.
so no, no, no. So we're
I didn't
slow
want to derail too
grind,
much from the
and
Yep,
then Japan. So
yep,
talk I don't know. We got sidetracked and I loved it.
yeah, I'm good
But
at
then I
derailing.
forgot where we were.
I'm good at derailing people.
No, it's all
So,
good.
junior year of college, I was on, I believe it was spring break, and I was in Arizona with some buddies, actually in Sedona, Arizona, beautiful
Yeah.
place, and we were
Love,
hiking.
love Sedona, man.
Yeah, so amazing. I was just back there in November, actually.
Yeah, it's so relaxing and
Oh
just
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, there's nothing like it. But so we're hiking there at this place called Bell Rock,
Been
and
there.
oh, have you? Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah, so we all decided to start running down the trail on the way back to the car, just, like, having fun, and we're, like, kinda racing each other, and I go to pass my buddy on this trail, I jump over a little shrub, I trip, and I fly, like, with my hands out, and I land in such a way that my elbow pushes into my kidney, and at the time, I didn't know this, but exploded my kidney.
Oh,
So, I landed on the ground, and I immediately knew, like, something was severely wrong, like, I never felt a pain like that before.
right.
Um, and I was, like, turning white, and they're like, "Oh my god, man, what happened? Are you okay?" And they ended up rushing me to the hospital. They ended up transferring me to another hospital, and, it's crazy because it actually healed inside my body, like, a week later, but they were thinking they had to do surgery. It was, like, a month later, a month process of it healing.
So
But
you
when
just
that
you
happened,
birthed that bad boy and healed it inside
yeah,
way
it
and
heals
out.
inside of me.
Wow.
But when that happened, I had to drop out of school for a medical reason because I couldn't go back to class then at that point. So I was supposed to go back to
Ah,
class in a few days.
yeah,
So, not only was I at a time where I wasn't really sure what I was doing at school, now I'm really like, "Okay, what am I doing?" Like, I don't have
right,
class, I'm injured, so I heal up, and I had another friend that was kind of in a similar situation of he was just going through the motions, and he wasn't in college at the time, but we were friends since high school. And we just came up with this crazy idea essentially one night, and we're like, what if we just sold everything we had and we were thinking of other countries, we looked at a few different countries, and like, what if we just went to like Japan and just sold everything? And we convinced each other to do it. And it was about 3 weeks later, we were on an airplane, and I had sold like my turntable set. I had sold a portion of my drum set. Like I had sold like a bunch of stuff that I had owned, like pretty much most of my belongings.
right.
And we bought a ticket out there and went and stayed in a hostel, and it completely changed both of our lives. He never came back. He still lives in Japan, married a
Yeah,
Japanese woman, and loves his life, loves living out there.
yeah,
And for me, it made me take a hard look at myself and really think about what I was doing. And Japan was such a different place, and the people there were so different. And the culture, by the way, is amazing. The people are so friendly and respectful and kind. And it made me realize, like, wow, there's so much other things to life than just like America and the way people live here.
right,
And just got me thinking about really like, what do I want to do with my life? And I had always like been interested in like plant medicine and cannabis and natural remedies and healing.
right.
And I liked getting high at the time, so it was like
That doesn't hurt, right?
so, I came up with this whole idea of starting like a cannabis course. The state that I live in at the time was just enacting their medical laws. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. And so I was out in Japan for a little over 2 months. I was intending on being there quite a bit longer. And I booked an earlier return flight home and then started on my cannabis journey.
See, so that's interesting to me because, like, when you told me this story when we talked before, I'm thinking like years, but you're only there for 2 months, and I think it goes to show, and it's so cliche, right? Uh, but force yourself to change or take a risk. Now, again, people misinterpret risk sometimes, to the extreme of your like, you took the extreme path, right? But you
Yeah.
also were in college age and you didn't have a mortgage, you weren't married, you didn't have kids to deal with, right?
Yep.
Um, but for my version of that is I moved across the quit my job and moved across the country. Also, another pretty extreme
Yeah.
move that a
Yeah.
lot of people wouldn't do. But
Mhm.
if you can find the strength to do that, in whatever way it fits into your life, it is insanely impactful, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's huge. I think traveling is so important and exposing yourself to, like, unfamiliar situations, and, I mean, that's really how you grow, right? You don't grow from, like, comfort, and
Right.
I think
Right.
it's all about, like, challenging yourself, but, yeah, I'm so happy that I decided to do it, and it's so transformative for my life and his. It completely changed both of our lives for eternity, and I don't really know where I would be at now today if I wouldn't have done that trip.
Yeah, and it's just pivotal moments like that. Same with me of moving across the country. Real quick side note, just on Japan in general, like living there. You mentioned culture and stuff like that. Any takeaways that you brought back with you of like, hey, this is the way I want to be, or
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
is a better way that I should be living my life, or anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that's really when I started to have realizations about, like, being mindful and more respectful. And a great story that I like to tell is, it was an evening there, and we had finished dinner, and it was, like, getting dark, and we're going to cross the road, and there's a sign that says, "Do not cross," and you look both ways, and there's no cars coming at all at sight,
Right,
and meanwhile, there's 30, 40 people waiting there until the sign says, "To cross." And
right,
that always just really stuck with me because the people there are very respectful and, they actually, like, listen to a lot of things, if that makes
right,
sense. Like, I feel like a lot
right,
of people here just do stuff, not necessarily, like, classifying America in that way. Maybe it's just, like, the times that we live in, but there was completely the opposite. Like, people were so mindful and respectful, almost to, like, a crazy degree to me because I'm like, "There's no one coming. Why are you not crossing the road?"
right,
That,
right.
like, that always stuck with me, that specific situation.
Yep.
And when I came back from Japan, um, it really did change my life, my entire life. Like, I really was a much more mindful person. I was a much more respectful person. And even though I was there for just a few months, I mean, it really changed my entire outlook on life.
Right, right.
Um, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, it was very impactful on me.
Yeah, and there is something to be said about, and again, I think it's balance, right?
Mhm.
Uh, you can't have somebody completely controlling things, but you can't have complete anarchy either, right?
Yeah.
And there is something to be said about following rules and having some type of order to the world, right? We strive to see order as well.
Mhm.
That's an interesting tidbit because I have had one very few people that I know traveled to Japan said it was a miserable experience. Most people say it was
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then 2, just that impact of culture as well. Uh, Again, just another, you don't have to take the crazy risk of moving to Japan, but you can get on a plane and go witness some other things that will
Yeah.
change your mindset and open up your mind. Okay, so you come back. Let's go through, just kinda like business and entrepreneur, mindset, and I would say, as you're going through this, I'm really interested in the context of, because when you start a business, and there's lots of people that will listen to this that are like, I love getting high and I like cannabis too. But if you want to start a cannabis company, you probably can't get as high as much, right? Like you got to get your shit together and build a business. I am interested in those really learning lessons, those big failures and pain points as you're evolving into the kind of person you are today.
Yeah, and then the last thing though too, I just forgot about this, aspect of
Yeah.
Japan I wanted to touch on, and another thing that blew my mind is I had dropped my wallet once, in the evening. We were walking to a restaurant and had like 100 to $150 in it,
Yeah.
and, we'd walked like at least 10, 20 minutes past it. Long story short, we turn around and the wallet's sitting there, and there's just, like, people walking around it, like, thousands of people, because I was in Tokyo, I wasn't in a small town.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, that also just blew me away. I'm like, "That would never have happened in the United States."
Right, no one took it, like, they just, like,
Yeah,
somebody lost that, we're gonna
yeah,
make sure that, we don't take it so
we
they
don't touch
might be
it,
able to
yeah.
come back and find it.
But yeah, in business, man, I've had so many failures and so many problems and so many times where it just seems like it's all over and
Right.
just gotta keep pushing forward and moving forward. I'm remember, like, specifically an instance when we had first opened and started. We were one of the first 10 licenses in the state here,
And this
which
is
I
now you're back in Michigan, right?
Yep, back in Michigan now.
Okay.
And, there's a point specifically where we had sourced product from a grower, and everything was relatively new here, so the guidelines were kind of, like, strange, and there was a lot of gray areas, and I guess the grower, like, had used pesticides when they weren't supposed to, and when we got the product, it all tested clean, but when we make concentrates from products. That's what we do, like vape pens,
Right.
so on and so forth. But when you concentrate it, of course, would concentrate the pesticide, so the batch
Mm,
ended up failing testing, and it was an enormous amount of money. And at that time, it was very hard to even get product in the first place. So yeah, it just felt like everything was over. And I've had so many of those experiences and
So
times, and
talk to
it's
me
like,
about that specific experience, because that's really interesting. Because it's you're spending a lot of money, it's towards the beginning.
mhm.
What got you through that, man? Well, like, looking back, what was the product of continuing to push forward?
Just the persever. I mean, just knowing that I wasn't going to go out just based on that. Like it's, working so hard for most of my life towards a certain goal, I'm not going to let something just take me out like that. Like if I'm going to be exiting the business or the company, it's going to be on my terms, at least
Right.
hopefully. You can't always control that, but
And so can you talk
um,
to me specifically about, because again, that's a theme that comes up. I'm actually interesting. I want to intertwine this a little bit more, but like practically, how did you get past that? Now you're out money.
yeah, it was like
Now
a
you're condensing.
$75,000 hit.
Right. So how did you actually get past that? Like,
At that point, I negotiated things with the grower. This was like 7 years ago now, so I'm trying to remember, but negotiated stuff with the grower. Ended up getting a portion of the money back. Regardless, the product had to be destroyed, and that was a crazy story at the time. They actually like send up state police and they destroy this product with you. So where they were
wow.
like state police smashing cartridges with hammers. Wild thing, yeah, it's crazy. They used to, like, go through our trash cans, and it used to be pretty messed up how it
Right.
was in the beginning, and a lot of that's now not that way. But, yeah, man, I just kept going. I mean, we had a little bit more money left to keep continuing to buy product, and we just slowly, like, worked our way back up.
Yeah,
Uh,
and what was but the other thing that I hear there is, like, you didn't just, shove the tail in between the legs, but you also problem solved in the sense of, obviously, this wasn't your fault. A little bit of the onus goes onto the grower, and you were able to go back and salvage some of that money to allow you to keep going. And I think, again, back to and this is why we talk about all this, is like you obviously had some type of creative mindset, which is also a huge impact and analytical thinking and problem solving. Like you're going to be hard pressed to start a successful business or be successful at I would say a high level without that problem solving chops. Any thoughts there?
yeah, I think, in business especially, there's always so many problems, it's just a nonstop thing. It's like when something seems like it can go wrong, it typically does,
Yeah.
and it's like kind of a joke of ours now around the office. So, yeah, we don't live in an ideal world, like, something's always going wrong no matter what. So, it's sort of just getting used to that and realizing no matter what, there is no perfect path, and it's never gonna be easy. In fact, it's often quite very difficult, but it's
Right.
just pushing forward, and if you have a goal in mind or a certain thing you're trying to accomplish, is really not letting anything get in the way of it, like, no matter how big it might seem at the time, really in the end, like, it's a small little road bump, it's a small little speed bump. It's not the end of the world. And at the time, it really might seem like it is, but it's a matter of just continuing on and going. And that perseverance is, for me personally, what's gotten me to the point where I am today. And through all these headaches and problems and failures and issues and businesses failing and some being successful, it's just continuing to move
Yeah.
and
And so
keeping my head down and working hard. And sometimes you really just want to quit. It seems like the whole world's over, but the next day is another day.
one, the next day is another day. Two, having people around you to support you is always a huge help. Like you said, and three, mindset. One of the things I'm interested is because you've started businesses in multiple different industries, right? Um, my question is, out of all of the things that you talk think about being an entrepreneur, um, managing staff, balancing your finances, dealing with obviously regulation in your industry in particular. What do you think was the hardest? What was your biggest challenge out of all these different verticals that you had to deal with? And what do you think challenged you the most?
I think the most challenging part was learning how to manage people properly and effectively. And for me personally, just to be a little bit vulnerable here, was really like speaking what's on my mind and not allowing people like run me over,
Mhm.
because that seems to happen like quite often. Um, sometimes the loudest person in the room like gets what they want. And
right.
business is generally, like, pretty cutthroat.
Yeah,
A lot of times, like, I wouldn't necessarily, like, wanna create a problem, and so I wouldn't, like, voice my opinion perhaps, and it was always, like, the worst thing to do because inevitably bigger problems would stem out of that. So, I guess my biggest challenge really was learning to be a leader, and, always just saying what's on my mind, but at the same time, you have to be, like, calm and calculated about it, and you can't just say things right off the cusp. So there's, like, this whole other thing that you dive into of, like, when do I say something and how loud do I say it and how many people do I say it in front of and
right.
so on and so forth. So it's just been, yeah, it's been interesting navigating all that and yeah, just somewhat learning on the fly. I mean, I've been doing it for years and years and years now, but I still feel like every day I learn a tremendous amount.
Yeah, and I'm glad you like, thank you for sharing with that because we hear that a lot, it really is. You would think that somebody that's starting a company would inherently understand how to lead in people, but people are just so complex and it's really, really difficult. Even though there are some principles, and so me and my co-founder Manny, uh, we've led in massive organizations. He had his own multi-million dollar company as well. Uh, and our biggest struggle is trying to be the nice guy. And it wasn't necessarily being like I still don't I wouldn't let people run me over, but I want to please everybody.
Yeah.
And when you it's very difficult to be a leader.
Mhm.
And first early on in my career, I wasn't even 25 yet, and I was starting to manage a team, right? And that whole I want to be everybody's friend. And then you all go to a company outing, you puke in one of your coworkers' cars, and you're like, oh, I got to show up and like tell him what to do the next day. That makes it a little more difficult, right?
Yeah, it's a
So
fine boundary for sure. And it's
yeah,
unfortunate because I realize that too. It's very difficult to be friends with the people that work under you.
yeah. So you said one thing. Any other thing that comes to mind? Because I think mine was kind of the nice thing, and then there's obviously like you got to build a mission. You have to have a vision. You have to do that. Like there's some table stakes things that surprisingly to me, most leaders still don't understand. They're
Yeah.
because they're kind of thrown in that leadership position. You personally in your journey, one, speaking your mind, anything else there that you think helped kind of grow as a leader and help you effectively manage people?
There's so many things to think about, over the time. It's been so many lessons.
Yeah,
But effectively, like in managing people specifically, uh, you sort of touched on it too, or like narrating these personalities or dealing with these different personalities and really putting someone like finding what they're actually good at it, because they might even not even realize what they're good at. Finding what they're good at, believing in them, trusting in them, and then putting them into that position. A lot
yeah,
of times I've seen people really rise and transform their entire life because of that, because now it gives them this newfound confidence that they might not have ever had before.
right.
And they see that I'm like respecting them for this ability that necessarily, like I said, they didn't know they had.
No, I love that, man, and I see that especially often, and this comes to play in corporate America, but in every business, even in smaller businesses. And we actually had a great conversation. I don't know if you were listening to some of the zombie
Hmm.
say podcast that we just had,
Yep,
but
I
it goes
listened to
back
it.
to that ego, right?
Hmm.
And that's where I see the biggest mistake is the political and the ego stuff in there. uh, they let that take away from practical knowledge like that because um, I think everyone again, like we said, has a superpower, and if you can put them in the right position, they could be very successful, and it could really like change and impact their lives. Unfortunately, a lot of leaders, especially in corporate America, get caught up in their own shit, and they don't spend the time that they should developing their people. I
Hmm.
mean, they don't. They very rarely spend any time at all, right? Which is because they're too caught in the minutia of like playing the game and actually quote unquote doing work. When in my mind, to be an appropriate leader, 80% of your time should be spent on people, not the other shit, right?
Yes. Yeah, the people thing is huge, and I mean, it's like you don't wanna be a people pleaser, and you don't wanna be people's friends, but at the same time, you wanna be friendly with them, and
Right.
it's like,
Right.
I feel like every day I learn so much, and, there's also been, like, a lot of books that I've read that have truly helped me, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think is one of the better
Mhm.
books I've read. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior is another great one, but, I think one of the best things is just realizing you don't know everything,
Right.
and it's never gonna be perfect, and there's always gonna be problems, but it's a matter of how you navigate those issues, and as long as you're trying to get a little bit better each day, not only yourself, but your company, I think eventually, you'll get to these places that you wanna get, but it's a slow process, and
Yeah.
often it never really seems to happen overnight.
Yeah, and
Sometimes
I
you see
think
these people do things, you're like, "Oh, wow," it seems like it was overnight, but
right, right, and I think what you said is so critical, and probably the thing that I a lot of people ask me, like, "Why do you do what you do?" And I think the number one thing is every time I come on a podcast, I learn something new, and I learn a new perspective from a completely different person. And that is fascinating to me. Not only am I interested in that, but it makes me better as a person, right? Because now I have another frame of reference to go back on, um, and use as I progress. I just love that, man. So to your point of making sure you stay humble and think you don't know everything, this show keeps me incredibly humble because of just the vast knowledge that comes on the show and the so many different perspectives, right? I mean, I just remember the guy from Chompies, like, um, he was flying to like third world countries to like help get clean water to people, right? And meanwhile, he's just a nurse in the US, but like his heart was that big and has all these crazy stories. And like I wouldn't have known about half of this stuff. And the fact that we get to talk to people all over the world, how cool is that, right? Every continent I've had now somebody on the podcast other than
Uh,
Antarctica, obviously. Um, but yeah, it's just so cool. So let's do this. It's cool. I like our conversation because we've kinda mixed in a lot of the it's totally fine that we're not going clear episodes. I definitely wanna get into Web3, especially because you picked Say, which I love, and I think, is an interesting blockchain, and I wanna make sure we talk about that. Anything else kinda in this episode 2 professional career, skill set, mindset, success, failure, anything else that you wanna add before we start transitioning into the Web3 thing.
I can't think of anything specifically, if I was to give anyone advice, it would just be like stay open-minded and, don't give up. I mean, that's the most important thing is just don't give up. If you have a goal that you want to reach, just keep trying and eventually you will get there, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen.
Yeah. And one thing for that, before like added on to it just sparked a thought is,
Mhm.
I talk a lot about mental health and how I went through some really serious mental health. And one thing that I always think about when things are bad is I promise you, when I was second to second, there was nothing I know I cannot experience anything worse in my life. Uh, but I put one foot in front of the other, literally life second to second, right? And to your point, no matter how bad it gets, if you can just continue to move forward, no matter how you do, it can change, man, and it's magical. Um, and that's such a powerful thing, especially for entrepreneurship and just people in Web3 in general, because it's a tough, it can be very toxic in
Oh
these
yeah.
arenas, in these crypto
I think
Twitter arenas.
I think practicing, gratitude is huge too. A lot of what we
Mm,
have, we just take for advantage,
yeah,
running water, electricity, all these other things that necessarily a lot of people do not have.
right, right,
Also in times when I felt like that, I've tried to step out and look at what I do have and like trying to change my mindset, my mind frame to
yeah,
positive instead of like the negative.
yeah,
It really
yeah,
is like a rewiring of your brain.
yeah. And the other thing I say about this show is it's one of the things that that made me realize, and I struggled with this my whole life, right? Is because again, we are rehashing a lot of principles that we know help success, a better life, a better mindset. But until it clicks with you, right? And you hear someone like yourself on the podcast, because my story does not resonate with everybody, but your story resonates with a different amount of people. So that's the other thing that I urge, right? Is you got to keep on trying, exposing yourself to different people, because eventually you will have someone, or you will read something, or you will meet someone that makes the long, hard work over a long time, that theory, right, click with you because they did it in your way. And now you're like, oh, I get what now I understand what people are saying. And I had that epiphany once I got through all of my stuff. Hence the name of the company, Midlife Crisis, right? Change the mindset.
And you know something that's been huge for me, I'm sorry, they're asking me something isn't available,
Nah,
I just
it's
wanna
all
say.
right. Just take a pause, man. We got 69 people watching us. It's the perfect number.
That's funny. Something I was gonna say too that I heard recently in a podcast that's been helpful for me in like the whole like rewiring and focusing on happiness is before you go to bed every night, think about all the good things that happened in your day. Like,
Yeah.
today I went for a great walk with my dog. Today I was on a podcast with you. I had a great meal, so on and so forth. Go through all those positive things before you go to sleep. And it really helps to also rewire your brain to focus and start to like pick out good things instead of the negative things because a lot of it really is your mindset and what you
Hmm.
focus on, and when
Hmm.
you're depressed it's easy to think everything's going wrong, but when you kind of like start to rewire a little bit and think of, oh, what did happen good today, what did go well, and start to kind of like do that mantra almost. It's helped me like a tremendous amount. So
Yeah, man. I love that you brought that up. I have this literally this, it's called a panda planner, right?
okay.
And it goes down to like I mean, schedule down to the half hour. It's pretty insane. Now, listen, do I use it every day? Absolutely not. I don't have that consistency,
Mm.
but I will tell you, if I use it for like 4 to 5 days in a row, and part of it is, your gratitude or writing down what went well for the day, it definitely makes you feel better. So I love that advice, and I think that's great for anybody that's listening. All right, man, take us to Web3, because you've gone through like owning a fashion company, a wellness company. You're still currently in the cannabis industry, right? You still own the company,
And I
right?
still own the wellness company too.
Okay, and you still own the wellness company. Uh, but you're making some badass art in Web3. You're an artist, and you picked the Say blockchain. So
Yeah.
give us I'm telling you, man, I'm never gonna get this. Is the boomer side coming out. I literally just did this yesterday while I was giving my masterclass thing. Too long didn't read. TLDR of the beginning of your entry into Web3.
So by beginning into Web3, I always had like some type of fascination with crypto,
Mhm.
mostly because it was like decentralized. And I think the whole theory of money is kind of ridiculous and absurd with how it can just be printed and taxes and so on and so forth, the same dollar being taxed a bajillion times.
Right.
So I always had like some interest in it. I of course had friends that were early into Bitcoin like most people. And I just, I was always like, oh, it's at $2,000. It's too high. It's never going to go up more. And so on and so forth. Up until around the time that like the whole GameStop thing happened, if you remember the whole Reddit
Yeah.
GameStop.
Yeah.
So I was one of the people involved into that. I got lucky and I was really just reading on Reddit at the right time and early and bought a bunch of GameStop options.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
What did
I
you
feel like
buy GameStop at?
I bought options. So like, you
Oh,
know, yeah.
even better.
Yeah, it
Wow,
was
that's
really
awesome, man.
ridiculous. I
So you
remember one
made
day
it.
waking up and like shaking and like was like, this isn't real. Uh,
That's crazy, man.
So made it really a good chunk of money on all that. Ended up selling, but also I got screwed when the whole Robin thing had happened. Like I also had a ton of shares
Right.
and still some of these options when they stopped trading on the stock. So then literally it
Yeah.
just started to plummet. And it's a crazy
Isn't what
story
they
how that.
did with that illegal, basically?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
technically, yeah, it's pretty illegal. And there's a lot of
right.
people that talked about it as a documentary that's come out about it. But the thing is, nothing's really ever happened to him because of it. And it's getting that whole concept of like naked shorting, like selling shares that aren't even there and shorting companies with more shares than even exist. And
Mhm.
a lot of weird things happen in the financial world. So that opened my eyes to all that and how corrupt the entire system is revolving around money and stocks. And kind of just seems like a lot of it's like built up against people, right? Especially the average person with the way taxes work. And
100%.
like most people have no idea how to properly do their taxes. Yet these big corporations pay sometimes almost zero in taxes because of how they set up their companies. So a lot of that like didn't sit right with me. So I then finally took the dive into like Web3 and started to participate in it, which the first ecosystem I entered was Axie Infinity.
Mhm.
So I started playing that game quite a bit, and that led me into NFTs. And again, with my like obsessive, nonstop nature, when I like something, I just would work on it all the time and read about it all the time, and
Right.
found out about crypto Twitter. Eventually got into Wolf Game. I'm not sure if you had heard of that project.
Yep.
It's like a pretty active
That
community
went pretty
member.
wild there for a while, man.
Yeah. So I basically I didn't mint the stuff, but I got it the second day. So I was a whole part of like when the crazy wool prices and basically it was like 10, $15,000 a day all of a sudden. And then
So I don't take me that to the Wolf Game thing because I never I mean, I saw it blow up, right? But I never spent the time to understand. My understanding is it had to still be a Ponzi scheme, right? In some sense, because it doesn't exist anymore, right? The wealth dried up, or what
so
was
it's
going on with
still
the tokenomics?
around.
I know it's still around, but like it
Yeah.
wasn't being able to sustain what it did. And I know Ponzi scheme is a pretty harsh characteristic, but were the tokenomics legit or was it a hype thing? Tell me a little bit about
I
Wolf
think a
Game.
lot of it, and I think this goes with like any project, a lot of it is a hype thing. Now, the actual tokenomics themselves, no, I mean, there was exploits, there was things that occurred that people were able to take certain like economic advantages and
Mm,
like own certain plots of land that produced more of like a certain resource. And basically, some people were able to corner these certain resources. But if you look at like real life, like, actually, it's kind of just like real life. Like it's actually more exploits and
uh-huh.
bullshit in real life.
Right, right, right.
So nothing's perfect, but it was a great community. And at the end of the day, I met a lot of really cool people. I used to
Yes.
host their Twitter Spaces.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so every
No
Friday,
shit.
yeah, I was the co-host. But yeah,
Oh, cool.
so that's how I got into the whole spaces thing. And, at first I remember being so terrified to ever speak up on stage. And then slowly I grew to like it. Like this conversation, I was genuinely looking forward to it.
Right, right.
Um,
No, that's
so that
awesome.
was
So,
like,
yeah,
yeah, that was the intro.
I didn't think, the Wolf Game was up to any fishy, and I remember them talking, in s listening to the guys saying, like, they were legitimately trying to do it right, but just like anything and that's one that the number one thing I see with every founder that I talk to is there's this constant struggle with the hype and trying to keep the interest, and it's just not sustainable,
Mhm.
which then comes to the conclusion that if you are a founder, you have to create a legitimate business. Because if you don't, there's going to be money to made, but it is a very short, finite amount of time.
Yeah, we do really see some people have like a long lasting career in it, but even now that's only been a few years when you look at like these famous artists and stuff. But yeah, the hype is crazy hard to maintain. And it's interesting because almost like when it's happening, it feels so overwhelming that you're like, I don't know, it's like you're in the moment of it. So you don't really realize it and you kind of take
Right.
it for granted, I think, in a sense. And then, yeah, if it's always what's next? What's next? What are you making
Right.
next? It
And
does
I,
get tiring for sure.
in the community, one of my OG community members chimed in, and we used to say this because it was, when we started, it was end of 2021, really beginning of 2022, where NFTs were out of control. Everything was pretty much a rug or a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
But we were like, you know what? The real NFTs are the friends you make along the way, right?
Yeah.
That's the true NFT.
Yeah. I think it helps console us with some of our losses also.
We're trying to make because I always
Uh,
say this. I'm like, dude, I've made a lot of money in Web3, but I've also
oh yeah.
lost a lot of money. So net, I mean, I'm still up for sure, but it could be astronomical. But,
Oh,
it
I
is what
know.
it is. You live
Yeah.
and you learn, right?
It's funny because I have a good buddy in Germany, from high school that I reconnected with recently, and I knew he was, like, kind of into crypto, but I didn't really know how much, and
Right.
never checks Twitter. He just DCAs into Bitcoin and Ethereum every 2 weeks. He doesn't play the cycles. He doesn't care about any of that. He just slowly stacks it, and the guy's got, like, millions of dollars now in cryptocurrency, and he's like, "Bro, you must be, like, a multimillionaire in crypto. I mean, I know you've been heavy into it for a long time," and I'm like, well, there's this whole thing called trading that I've been trying to do, or that I was doing, and NFT trading, and all that shit that we all try to chase. And
Yeah,
yeah, for some people it works out really well, and for other people, you lose a substantial amount of money. And overall, I'd be pretty well off if I had just DCA'd into a lot of crypto and held it.
100%. I had this epiphany this week, bro, and I literally started last night. I started cleaning out my Discord, and I said, "I'm gonna delete all of these servers except for the founders that have been on my show that I believe in, that I still hold an NFT, maybe 2 alpha groups that I have friends in. Everything else is gone, and I am not buying into any coin. I am not buying into NFT. If obviously, I will be involved if I have a relationship for this show,
Yeah.
nothing else. I'm DCAing and everything, and that's it. I'm done, man. I just can't take it anymore
No.
because 'cause I'm not
Yeah,
good at
especially
it,
when you're
right?
when
I'm
you're
not
at it
even
for
good at it.
so long. What'd you say? I'm sorry.
I'm not even good at it, and it's nothing that really
Not
interests
either.
me, like, this interests me, like, there's so many ways to be involved in Web3, and that's what this part interests me, so, like, why am I not just doing that?
Mhm.
Instead of
Yeah,
combing through Discord trying to find, like, whatever the next fire thing is, cut up the podcast and get my content out. That's where I should be spending my time.
yeah. Well, it's difficult too, though, right? Because you hear these stories of like the boom thing that happened, and it's like people
Ugh,
literally made like, I had a buddy that put $89 into it. He made like 15 grand or something ridiculous. So it's like,
I
it's
know.
like this lottery ticket, and you're like, it's just on the next one. It's just on the next one. It's like chasing the dragon, and it typically doesn't end up well. And some of those
Yeah.
people that do, really make a ton of money and inevitably end up losing a lot of it also.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
And then again, we talk another lifelong principle we talk about. Okay, you put $1,000 or $2,000 in the boom, and uh,
you
you've
have a
got
couple grand
millions of
left.
dollars or whatever it is. But then what, right?
Yep.
And so, like,
And you're looking for the next.
as long as you're chasing the right thing, the money, the bags overnight. Listen, I get it. There are some people that need that, and it will change their life right away. Fortunately, I'm in a position where that is uh, just having bags of money is not going to solve what do I do next or what am I passionate about. And that is really the answer that we're all trying to find, I think.
Mhm. And I think a lot of people confuse like making money with happiness too. They think, okay, well, if I get rich, it's going to change my whole life. And it's a lot of times that are back or exacerbates the issues that you are already dealing with. And, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily really change anything. So maybe you have like a better car or a more comfortable house or whatever the case might be. So really, and the main thing I've learned throughout my life, and especially I've gotten older, is to focus on what makes you happy and to be happy. And sometimes that's like living a life that might be in a smaller house or not driving a nice of a car, but that allows you to maybe travel more or eat better food or whatever the case is. But truthfully, being happy and waking up and being passionate about something, that's really the most important thing in life, I think.
I know, and I've acquired both of those, and it's just a game changer when you can feel that way, right? And to the point about chasing money, my big epiphany on that one was, and I don't know why it took me so long to get to this point, but it was in my mid-30s, and I think we went to like Hawaii for like a week, or it was a little longer. It was like 10 days where it was like just enough time where you're starting to think like, okay, I've been here for a while, right? And I vividly remember sitting on the beach for like the 6th day, and I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of bored. Like, what I can't do this forever. People want to like vacation, like hit the lotto, vacation, and sit on the beach forever. And I'm like, I just can't do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, man. this is not the answer. And that was like my big epiphany sitting in Hawaii on the beach.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
me personally, I need to stay busy and I like working, on something at all times. It keeps me like sane.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But
All right,
also it's
so
great to take vacation, like you said. It's all about having that balance if you can find it.
oh, man, and it's
That's
so
the
difficult.
main
I
thing.
mean, we talk on this show like it's easy, right? And like, "Oh, yeah, we got it all figured out. We'll wake up tomorrow and it's gonna be a disaster." But right now, I feel really good because 'cause I'm talking to you, and you got your shit together, and I got my shit together, right? No, we
Yeah,
don't.
man, I try. It's,
No,
you can play that life of comparison where then you, like, look at other people and you're like, "Really, is my life that good?" Or da 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 da, but, really truthfully, I've built, like, a strong, solid foundation, and I'm
right,
happy, and I have all the basic things I need, and, I'm able to take trips when I want to, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I'm definitely blessed.
same.
And to touch back, I know you wanted to touch on the say thing, as part
Yeah,
of the
so let's go. So you were hosting Wolf Game Spaces.
Mhm.
I'm really interested because you have your own project in essence or artist. I'm actually interested in how you define that because you're an artist selling artwork. It's not a project per se, right? But take us through that experience. I'm really interested in why, say, when you decided to start making art, the whole evolution there.
Yeah, so I started making digital art back in high school, and always just really been into, like, Photoshop, creating art just for fun. Um
Right,
So, to do the TLDR, fast forward to my cryptocurrency experience, I started to hear a lot about like AI and AI technology, and I started to follow some AI artists, and I really liked the work that they were doing,
right.
like Lupe Renasto and Claire Silver,
Yes, Claire.
A Day in the Life, those projects. And it was just fascinating to me that these people are creating art with AI.
Right.
Um, And so I started to look into it more myself and slowly started to create art. I think like everyone starts like on ChatGPT or something, Dolly,
Mhm.
and just like couldn't really get anything of like what I wanted. And I'm like, oh, this looks so cool, type in like a cat with a hat on, in the space back, it's just some random stuff, and you're like,
Right,
oh, it really made it. But like there was no like overarching view or like theory on what I wanted to do.
right.
Um, and that was quite some time ago now. It was around the time that like Dolly and stuff came out. So as time went on, I started to learn about the other programs like Midjourney. There's a few other ones that exist, and for me, it was like a much easier program to use. And I really then at that point, it's probably about 8 months ago now, took like a maybe 7 months ago, took like a deep dive, and I just became again like that obsessive nature, and I just kept working on art like all the time. Like I just wouldn't stop making pieces. And a lot of the first pieces I made were like the dinosaur city theme pieces.
Love the dinosaurs.
Thank you. Yeah, I love those ones too. So that was like a huge it was like a breakthrough moment where I was like, "Wow, I'm actually creating something that I think looks cool."
Right.
It's like really unique, I thought, and stood out. And then I just like didn't stop. And my dog just walked into the room.
That's all
And
good.
didn't stop. And I then got into Say because I had seen people on Twitter like talking about it and saying, it's going to have potential growth. It's really fast. There's a whole like NFT community emerging there. And I personally was like getting pretty bored with ETH. Um,
Right.
Not to mention the gas fees are just like ridiculous. I mean, especially now once you use something like Say or Solana, you try
Oh,
to go back to ETH, you're just like, wait, what? Have to pay $60 to do something like at a minimum? Like, what is this?
I've publicly
Ridiculous.
said I quit ETH. Again,
Yeah.
if an ETH project comes on the show, I will support, but if I'm gonna have a choice to buy an NFT, it's hard pressed to try to do it on
Mhm.
ETH.
Yeah, I used to be like an ETH maxi. Like I used to be really into the domains, and I
Same.
even like registered some of the 4-digit domain names. Like when that was like a
Mhm.
huge thing, I was one of the first people to do it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so long story short, I saw Say and I started to join. So the first thing I did was I bought Ants
Yes.
Colony, I bought WeBump, and I bought Sayans. I got Sayans the day after mint. So I was actually in Say when they were minting, but I wasn't a part of the
How
mint.
much
So then
did
the
they
next
were they
day,
free?
yeah. Yep.
Wow.
So the
Wow.
next day they had come out on Pallet, and Pallet had like a 2,000 person waiting list and queue. Like when the website wasn't crashing, there was a queue. It was just like madness. And I was like, wow, this is like a lot of fun. This like really brought back a lot of why I got into Web3, and like it felt like invigorating again and
Right.
exciting. And not to mention the community. Like that's the biggest aspect to me that stood out is that people just were so genuinely nice and like welcoming. And I felt like all these people kind of had, a lot of them had been in Web3 before for quite some time. Now they're back in this community and they're like, wow, it's actually fun again. So everyone was like, I guess to put it like in a good mood and happy about Web3. And like it was kind of bringing back like this nostalgia that I think a lot of people had lost, especially during the bear market time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, people were just super welcoming and open armed. And I was in the colony holder chat. I don't even know if I've really ever told the story in depth. And I was in the holder chat in colony, and I just randomly decided to post a piece of my art. I'm like, yeah, you never know what's going to happen. and
Right.
uh, and I guess that's like a good point for life, right? Like you never know what's going to happen, and when you take those shots or those chances and reach out to someone, you never know if they're going to respond or what the reaction might be. So
Right. Yeah.
posted,
What we've been talking about, right?
yeah. So I posted some of the art, and one of the colony team members, great guy named Admiano, saw
Uh-huh.
my art and he's like, "Man, this is actually like really good." And he DM'd me and he's like, "Bro, I'm being serious. Like your art is really, really good." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, you should release a project." And I'm like, "Eh," and he's like, "No, I'm being serious. You should release an NFT project." And I'm like, I just then decided, okay, I'm gonna do it.
That's amazing.
And looking back at it, I was like, I don't even know what made me decide that because it was just like it wasn't like a knee-jerk reaction, but it was like I didn't think of all the steps and processes and like creating a Discord and all these other things that then had to happen. And all of a sudden it was like this overwhelming thing. And I'm like,
All
holy,
right.
what did I get myself into here?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but
Talk to
yeah,
me about that process though. Again, kind of like going through it. I think this is really good to hear, especially for Web3 people. Like, uh, who would you had on your side? I'm assuming you kind of started solo, trying to just figure it all out. But like, what would have made that journey easier now looking back?
having a team, like for sure, because I really did do almost all of it by myself. And still
Right.
to this day, I have one person that works with me as
Uh-huh.
like a Discord mod, and it's someone for me to like bounce ideas off of and stuff. But at the time, man, like it was all happening so quick, and there were so many people reaching out to me and DMing me and messaging me, and I did sometimes like didn't know who to trust or what was real or if someone was like trying to con me or what
Right.
was like happening because it all really happened so fast. So like I wish that I had, and there were actually was people that I leaned on from like my ETH days, from Wolf Game days, and people I'd become friends with that I asked for advice. But I wish I had like more of a team, I guess, working on the project with me together
And so
simultaneously.
what would that team look like down to like, and not like everyone, but is it like Discord security? Is it marketing? Like what would those key team members be that you think would have been the good makeup that would have helped you out?
I think someone like having like outreach or like handling messages, filtering messages, reaching out to communities like for collabs. I mean, but I had like hundreds of DMs just about collabs alone, but I literally didn't know who was real, who wasn't real, who I should work
Right.
with, who I shouldn't work with. So, but and this is one of those things where you meet the right person at the right time. I had met, someone that's a founder of a major project in Say, and they happen to like my art also. And, I'm not sure if it's like a mystery what project they founded, so I'm just not gonna get into that portion of it.
Yeah, that's fine.
But, they happen to really like my art, and they knew everyone in Web3, and they were linking me with every single person possible, like, all of a sudden, my phone would be going off, "Hey, jump into this call," and all of a sudden, I'm, like, on the call with these, like, influential people or people like major members of ETH communities or, like,
Right.
really popular, like, BAYC people. And that person helped me like a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous amount. And like I owe a lot of my success to that person.
That's amazing. And again, this goes back to what we're saying and why I love what we do is because how we preface um the whole conversation to where we're at now, it makes more sense. And there's a lot of reoccurring themes. And the one of the things that we said is social media is actual social media, right?
Mhm.
It's not just about posting and trying to get likes. It's actually about talking to people that are building and doing it through phone calls and conversations and seeing people on video, not necessarily doxing yourself, but having real conversations and not just spamming shit.
Yeah.
And again,
That's it.
right? right person at the right time is huge, dude. It's huge.
Definitely. And I think a lot of people are, like, scared to reach out to people, maybe or message them or DM
Mhm,
them because maybe they're not gonna respond.
mhm.
But throughout my whole life, that actually is, like, an overarching theme of how I've achieved some level of success in cannabis industry as well,
Yeah.
is reaching out to people that I saw that were doing bigger things than me,
Mhm.
and I would DM 10, 15, 20 people, and inevitably 1 or 2 would respond. And some of those people that responded currently right now are, like, some of my best friends in my entire life. Like, this one guy in the cannabis industry, literally, like, he's like my brother, he's family. Like, I go out and stay
Right,
at his house all the time. He lives
right.
in Maine. We've just really become like brothers, and I met him on Instagram by sending him a direct message, asking him how he created THCA diamonds back when, like, that whole thing started in the cannabis industry. And he was like, "You know what?
THC diamonds? I
Yeah.
can't tell me more. What do you boil in THC into a solidified form? I don't know.
So, you take THC, like, you take, like, an oil, like a live resin or a resin that you would make from cannabis product, whether it's frozen or dry.
Right,
Then, you have to dissolve that into another type of hydrocarbon that evaporates, not so quickly at room temperature because butane, which typically is used to extract cannabis products,
right.
at room temperature is a gas. So,
Mm,
it's like air, obviously. So you need something that's still liquid that you can work with. So you dissolve the cannabis oil into that, then goes through a process of being freezed to remove any impurities, fats, lipids, chlorophyll, anything else that could be in there. Then after that process, you filter it through glass filters. Then you slowly evaporate the solution and the crystals start to precipitate and grow. And they literally do look like diamonds, like clear diamonds.
dude, I'm
Um,
telling you this, between your cannabis tutorials and your AI tutorials, we're gonna be making some master classes together for the Web3 community. I'm
I
telling you,
love
we
it,
can make
man.
some beautiful content.
I love it.
Uh, oh, no, I love that. That's fascinating to me.
So, yeah, it's like the purest form of so it's THCA. It's what precedes THC. So most people don't know this, but, like, on a cannabis plant, if you were to just, like, eat the plant, it's not gonna get you high, you have to heat it to actually activate the
Right,
delta 9, the THC. So the crystal's the same thing. This crystal itself won't do anything, but once you heat it, it turns into delta 9, THC, which is a THC most people know, and it gets you high. So he was one of the first people to ever create this, like, SOP to create these things, and he was making, like, massive, massive ones, and most people can make one like the size of your thumbnail, maybe.
right.
So, yeah, but yeah, it was just another person that I happened to reach out to, and he happened to see my message, and we started talking on the phone. He's like, "Dude, just fly out and see me." And I'd never done anything like that where I just, like, flown out and seen someone that I hadn't really known. And,
That's a yeah,
I was like, I
that's
hope
a
he doesn't
wild
kidnap me or
feeling.
anything, like, joking around, but happened to be
Dude,
the nicest guy, man. I went and stayed with his family, and his wife's like, "Why'd you have this, like, stranger come stay with us?" She's like, at the time, she didn't know me, and she's like, "It was so weird." We were joking about this recently, and, he's like, "I don't know, man. I just had this feeling about him," and yeah, it was interesting
I
how we're
love that.
literally like brothers. Like,
You
he
know
would do
what?
anything for me, he'd give me the shirt off his back, and it's a mutual feeling, so
There's a theme there that I wanna touch on, but first, we have made midlife crisis history. I am now gonna be able to cut us short about how to properly get high off crystals, and I cannot wait to launch that one.
yeah, man.
Oh, but what you said about, putting yourself out there, absolutely, and I tell this story all the time. Some people have heard it ad nauseum, but my big break in kind of the Web3 space was being the original hate beast mod, right?
Mhm.
And the only reason that happened was I was tenured enough at that point to know, and this was in crypto's crazy, right? And if it was a hyped project, which hype was that the height of the hype, there was this small microcosm of time where most founders did not understand the shit show that was about to ensue and how rapidly it was going to ensue.
Yeah.
So they had not shut their DMs off yet, right? In
Oh, wow.
Discord.
Okay.
And but then they inevitably would get like 1,000 DMs within the first, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was my strategy, right? Because I wasn't scared because, at that time I'm still, I'm in my late 30s. I have a 15 plus year professional career. I'm like, I know I'm worth something, right? So I just DM'd Digimental and I was like, hey man, listen, I got my shit together. I have a professional career. Things are about to get crazy. I am someone that you can trust. And it was 3 sentences. And he was like, here's your PFP. You're in a hate beast mod.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And meanwhile, 3 days later, they put out the official mod application. There's like 20,000 people that apply, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, again, so true. You just have to put yourself out there, especially it's crazy to me too, because a lot of this is online, right? Like you're not even showing your face, you're typing on a keyboard. And I still talk to people that are like hesitant to do something. I'm like, the worst they can say is type the letter N
No.
and the
Yeah.
letter O and hit the enter button. Like, I'm sorry, but if you wanna do something and want to, better yourself and progress, you're gonna have to be able to handle a no through a virtual screen.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and advice for those messages too is make sure you're super clear and concise, like for people that are hearing this and want to start, practicing that and reaching out to people, because often these founders are very busy. They're getting hundreds or thousands of DMs. Same thing goes for people that founded companies, founder of whatever. And I wouldn't waste time being like, hey, hello, how are you doing today? Because a lot of times I'll get cut off too. So unless I actually click on your message, that's all they're gonna see, and they're never gonna open it. So, just be clear and concise, get to the point, and say what you want.
brilliant advice, and I don't actually think, I hear people say that often or enough, but very and listen, man, if you don't have that skill set, literally go to Chat GPT and say,
Yeah, right.
put this paragraph in 3 bullet points,
Yeah.
because it's so much more impactful and it'll be able to craft that down into some really concise messages. I actually take that lesson and I use that in corporate America, right? If
Mhm.
when I'm ever talking to senior executive management, my format is usually very simple. Hey, just wanted to update you on X colon bullet points and then action item, bullet point. Thanks.
Yeah,
Have a nice day.
yeah.
It's just so much more impactful, especially with the amount of in this Web3 space, and especially, man, that you can't manage the DMs. It's impossible.
No, I feel bad sometimes because some people DM me and I mean to get back to them, and it gets lost.
Yeah,
Like, I forget, and sometimes I'll see it a few weeks later, and unfortunately, sometimes I never see it again. So
yeah, and
that's also, yeah, be persistent.
that's another good advice. And like this is advice from my perspective, right? So back to what you were saying about no's and being uncomfortable with no's. I have had, I swear to you, thousands of prep calls. Part of my process, like we went through, right? I said, hey man, I need to schedule a half-hour call. That's my vetting process to make sure, like, hey, it's going to be a good fit. Well,
Mhm.
obviously, it takes me about, in the beginning, not so much now, but in the beginning, 100 no's to get a yes type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but to your point about messaging, one of the things that I have started is it's probably been about a year now. I have a OneNote, which is my Rolodex, right? And one question I always make sure to ask is what is the best communication method to get a hold of you, right? Because there's so many different, whether it be Telegram or
Mhm.
Discord or Twitter, and that's so critically important. One, to be able to concisely speak your mind, and two, making sure you're on the vehicle and mechanism
Yeah.
that they tend to use, right? So
Yeah,
obviously,
you're the only person that's ever asked me that, and I was like,
yeah.
"That's such a great question." Like, should it be Twitter? Should it be
It's critically important,
Yeah.
especially in, this space because it's weird in this space because you have a lot of people that are still in the Web 2 world or just prefer email. I have phone numbers, right? It's Telegram, it's Discord, it's X, it's WhatsApp, it's literally text messages, phone calls, or email, right? And so I got to figure out how the hell they want to talk, or else I'm never going to get anything done.
Yeah. Send a carrier pigeon with a little note.
Right, exactly. Okay, so yes, we're vibing with the community. That's actually why I got called in to say too. You talk to the founder of a big project. He helps promote you. Um, if you could do it all over again, you would take a team, you would definitely have an outreach person to help manage all of the communications. Anybody else there, or do you think that's really kind of the critical linchpin that you needed?
I had like a Discord admin and mod, but again, these people were just like thrown at me. Like I was like, hey, I need admins, I need mods, and the people were like, all right, let me connect you on a group chat. And so like I didn't really know these people super well.
Right.
So I guess I would have like planned it a little bit better and like handpicked the people that I wanted for certain positions.
Awesome. Okay, so now kind of getting into what you've done on Say, just tell us about you as an artist, or do you define yourself as a project? In essence, even if you were a business and knowing that you're an artist, like you got 2 minutes, basically an elevator pitch. Tell us what Sold1 is about.
Yeah, it's about taking people out of their element, their current reality, and transforming them into like a brighter, other version of reality that often makes people think and wonder why they're seeing what they're seeing and why it makes them think like a certain type of way. And to me, that's really important because I think today with the way things move and how quickly everything happens, a lot of people get caught up and lost like in what's going on. And I think this art sort of takes you out of that and makes you pause and reflect. And that's hopefully my intention with it. The art
Yeah,
itself, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say the art itself, I do treat like a business. I take it very serious. I really respect and appreciate all the people that collect my art and that give me compliments and that enjoy it, and that's inevitably what keeps me pushing forward. So those people are incredibly important to me, and I always make sure that they're taken care of with my future projects, and that they know that that has a special place in my heart.
And I love that description. I love that you actually had a concise explanation of that, because it's a little bit different because you are an artist. But what I loved about it is what you described is actually what I felt when I saw your artwork, right? I was like,
That's
oh,
all.
this is like just a really interesting play on uh, a cityscape with like vibrant colors, and it feels a little otherworldly,
Mhm.
and then it's got a T-Rex in it, and who doesn't love T-Rex, especially if you're
Right?
a dude, right? So I was like, this is fantastic.
That's
And I had that it made me feel a certain way, and that's when I saw it at first, I instantly like I saw the artwork and I was like, okay, how do I get a hold of them? And I immediately DM'd you. And
yeah.
then one of the things that has been huge is the Say Cabal. Shout out to Mike, man. I mean, that is a excellent group in the Say world to just get connected with the right people. And again, back to like what we were saying, uh, if you are starting out or continuing to try to grow, especially in the Web3 industry, you have to find um, some of those groups that have some of the people that are building, especially the people that are building, not so much the influencers, because that's a whole nother shady bag of can of worms. But really the people that are building, and chats like that help me even reach out to you quicker because I
Yep.
was able to build credibility within that space. But yeah, once I saw your artwork, it was immediately I got to talk to this guy.
Thank
And it
you,
was
man.
really cool for you to describe that, because that's literally how I felt.
Thank you.
Uh, so my someone in the chat was like, "How do I see this artwork?" It's cool. So I remember how I told you I was streaming video games for like a year and a half. This
Mhm.
guy OG Cryptor in the chat was one of the original guys, like one
Oh,
of the
nice.
20 people that watched me play video games, and they're
Yeah,
still here, like coming to the chat. It like makes me feel good.
that's
Uh,
so cool.
but I'll put the link in so you can see your artwork. So talk to me about current. So you released uh the T-Rex. What do you call the T-Rex?
Daydreams.
So Daydreams, that's
Yeah, is
right.
the name of the
You released
collection.
that collection. That's currently on palette.
Mhm.
Um
Yep,
what
which is on
else is
Today
going on
Clock.
currently, and what does the future look like then?
Yeah, so the future right now looks like a project coming out on Ordinals. I've set a date for April 20th because I thought it's just a funny date, right? And that kinda tied up with when the art was gonna be done and everything else.
Yeah.
Um, I also, like, wanted to set a date because it puts a little pressure on myself to actually get it done. With the first project, I didn't have a date. And I kept like trying to like set one, and the person that was like mentoring me and helping me was like, "Do not set a date because, inevitably most people miss it." But because of that, I took like 3 extra weeks to actually release my project, and I missed being the first AI project on Say, which I think, looking back, had a huge implication, on the way it was received, on being the first is always huge. And, would I change anything? No, but I think now having the date set, like, pushes me to go harder, and I know that,
Right.
like, it's looming, so I have to do so much every day to get to that point. So, yeah, right now I wanna launch on ordinals, that's the goal. Seems pretty daunting, like, I decided it, and then I was like, "Wow, there's, like, really a lot into this," and I knew, like, what goes into it, but, like, it's just so much more when you start researching it, and it's a whole other community to tap into.
Right.
I'm not trying to, like, leave Say or, like, move away from it. Say will always be my home, and the people there I always, like, consider essentially family.
Right.
But at the same time, we're at a point where a lot of projects aren't minting out. A $20 to $40 mint's, like, expensive. And this first project I did completely for free. I spent hundreds and hundreds and, hundreds of hours, like, neglecting my actual business and just
Right.
working on it, like, 12 to 14 hours a day. And, yeah, I can't do that for free again. So I need to get, like, reimbursed for my art, and it's important, I think, too, that the art has a value attached to it because it brings future value to it as well.
So
Um,
so all amazing. But you bring up the burning question, right?
yeah,
Why in the hell on Say? Now I get Say is early DGEM vibes. It is Solana 2021 all over again. I get
yep,
that, right? But to your point, one of the things that I love about Say is it is a lot of Web3 veterans, and you get the vibe that when you're talking to the builders of this space, that it's their opportunity to actually do it the right way this time, right? So
yeah,
then why in the hell does everyone expect it to be free, and then, by the way, goes and buys an ordinal or transfers an ETH, NFT and pays $70, but then they can't spend 20 bucks on a Say NFT? What is
yeah.
happening? Do you have any theories?
I think it's like a weird loop that happened because we had, like, Cappies and stuff that came out, and at that time, really, like, that was an expensive mint for, like, the Say ecosystem, but really in all
Yeah, what
sense
is
of
it,
the word.
160 bucks?
Yeah, I think around there, yeah.
Wow.
Um So that, like, kinda put a bad taste in people's mouths, though, because it was quite expensive, and then really nothing much has seemed to come of it. So, I
Yeah,
think what happened is, unfortunately, early, a lot of this liquidity kinda got, like, sucked out, um,
right,
by, like, a few of these bigger projects that seemed kind of like it in hindsight, that's what they were trying to do.
right. No,
Uh,
and I think that's actually I think that's probably the right answer. I mean, I don't know, how much did Cappies make? Couple million bucks?
I think it was, like, at least 500,000 or something. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
at
yeah, it had
least
to have been
a half
over that. I think
at
they
least
had
a half a million bucks. I don't think it was a
Yeah, 'cause
couple
there's
million.
10,000 pieces, and I think 2,500 were done in presale, which who knows what cost that was, and then the
Right.
other 7,500. But,
Yeah, so they made a
oh,
solid chunk of
yeah,
change, and, but even that, it's and this is the I never agreed with the free mint meta back in the day when it was a thing, right?
yep,
Because if you're doing this right, you're putting your hard-earned blood, sweat, and tears into this, and you just can't do things like I talk about this all the time. It's like people, the internet actually did us wrong, right? Because everyone's like, "Oh, the internet's free," and it's like, no, the internet is not free. You have paid with it through your data and you sharing your
yeah,
entire life on Facebook. That is
exactly.
the cost of
Yep,
the internet. Now
yep.
it seems free, but there is a drastic trade-off and consequence to sharing your entire life on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
But things just cannot be free. That's not how the world works. Uh, so I don't get it, man. It's a shame because I feel like we have the right mindset, we have the right vibe in the ecosystem, uh, and we have builders like Benny, man. He was on this show. He's already spent a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
like that
money
show.
building a casino, and he is building it like a business, a serial entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And the dude gets skewered over a $40 mint. It's like this is insane to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
and and there's this whole narrative too, like, and I've heard even, bigger people say this and say, it's like, well, $30, I don't know if that's gonna mint out. And it's like, or 30 say, it's not even $30, or 40
Yeah.
say, and it's like, I don't think it's a good perspective to have. And what inevitably it does is people that want to build quality projects and want to put their hard-earned time and soul into this, they're not going to end up coming to that ecosystem then.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
inevitably what's going to happen. And it's unfortunate. And like for example, we've seen Nix, who I think he wants to transfer his project to Solana now.
Yeah.
And I was in a space the other night with people, and they were like pissed that this one person in particular, I'm not going to call them by name, but they were like pissed off that he was like leaving. Like, he was just here to extract value, and now he's going back to Solana. And I'm like, wait, hold on, you realize he did his entire project for free? It was a free mint. And
Right.
now so like really the people that made money, the ones that minted it for free and then sold it for a couple hundred, say. But
Right.
now he can't now go to another chain, like, now that's a problem, and I'm like, it's not a good way of thinking, I think, because then it makes people not either wanna come to Say, or they, like, it's like a strange perspective. I think it's not healthy.
Yeah.
I think people should be able to release stuff wherever they want to, and inevitably, people have to charge for stuff. I mean, the whole free thing, like you said, it can only go so far, and I did it for free because I was an unheard of artist. I never really released a digital art project as
Right.
so
Listen, most people that start out at something, when I started doing this podcast, I did it for free for a long,
yeah,
long time because I had no following and I didn't know what I was doing. Right.
yeah,
And that's understandable. You bring up something interesting though, and I'll ask you this. And then there's a community question, and we can start wrapping up because we are, believe it or not, an hour and 51 minutes in.
wow, it goes by so quick, that's crazy.
Doesn't it? It's
Yeah, it
people say
does.
that all the time.
Yeah.
Um, being a founder in Web3, take say out of it, right? What is your advice, man? Because it's brutal. I always use this explanation of in Silicon Valley, you've got venture capital firms, people come in and they're like, I'm going to give you hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you're successful. You screw up in Web3, even though people have your money, they are willing and open to destroy you, which is in essence burning their money. How
Yeah.
do you deal? Uh, just advice, really, thoughts on being a founder in the Web3 space?
It is very challenging. I've been obviously a founder, like, in Web 2 or whatever, like, in normal circumstances, and,
Yeah,
yeah, it's brutal sometimes in Web 3. I think the most brutal part about it was just that there's always this expectation. Like, when I came out with my project, it was like 4 days later, people in the Discord were already asking, "What's next? When's your next project?"
right,
And I'm like, "Oh my god," like, this just came out, like, I've hardly even slept in the last, like, 2 weeks, like, well,
right,
need a
right,
chance to, like, recuperate. Um, but my best advice would be setting, like, a clear, like, intention and being upfront with people. So, if you're kind of, like, open-ended about it, people are gonna expect the world, and if you don't deliver it, they're gonna be pissed off. So be very clear about what your project is, what you're trying to do, what the long term looks like. Listen to your community and take feedback. And don't get discouraged, because no matter what you do, here's also like the issue is the people that are unhappy are typically going to be the loudest people. And so it's easy to think that then everyone has that narrative or that belief. But often there's so many people that are happy, but they're just not speaking up because they're happy. They have nothing to say. So you can
mm,
easily then get like swayed to like hearing a few bad things, and you're like, oh man, everyone must be upset. And
yep,
that kind of happened with my project originally, is like I had no, it was just art, and there wasn't really like anything attached to it beyond that. It wasn't like a token. It wasn't like a website coming out that was going to be like a casino or any of these other numerous things that people have done and succeeded
right,
with, but that's not what I was trying to do. And then
right,
I started to think I had to do that
right,
because like a few people in Discord were saying that, like, what's next? What's the what is the whatever. So I then had a meeting with all my holders, like with a company. I'm like, treated it like a shareholder meeting. I'm like, you guys are like shareholders, and this is the first company meeting. It's literally what I said and how I opened the meeting. And I went on, I had this speech that I read, and then I opened it up to everyone else, the community members. And I got all the feedback from everyone. They're like, no, we're completely happy with this just being art, and that's what it should be. And, but I had thought that these few people that were unhappy were speaking for the majority, and it wasn't the case. So,
yeah, yeah. No, I love that you say that. Another founders that came on that who have built a massive brand, imaginary ones,
Oh, wow.
who become good
That's
buddies. Like,
huge.
dude, amazing guys, right? The
I
guy
love that
Jet
book.
Whale, his name's David, and then Clement. Uh, couldn't be nicer guys. Just like humble, hardworking, exact same advice. Like if they could do it over again, they listen to the community too much, and more importantly, they listen to the wrong part of the community. You
Mhm.
really, as a founder, the most critical thing, because it's the best part about brand 3 as a founder. I mean, web 3, which I call brand 3, why I
Yeah.
said it, is it's for the first time you can interact with your brand and your community like never before. But it's also a huge setback if you don't properly treat it right, because you end up listening to the wrong people, and that really can set you back and damage you. Um, and the same thing happened to them in the beginning. They listened to the wrong people. Uh, and it was community members, not like advisors, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get so obsessed again with pleasing people and making sure the community's happy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're a founder and you're building a business, and your job is not solely to make the community happy. It's an impossible task, right?
Well, I think
Um,
it's important to remember that they're there in the first place for what you did without any, like, outside noise or community, like, you got to a certain area on your own. So I really think it's important to listen to your heart, and, this is something I heard Rick Rubin say, who's, like, a very famous, like, music producer, and,
yep.
he said, "Create art for yourself, don't create it for other people. You gotta be
Right.
creating art for yourself."
Oh, absolutely. I had she was a great conversation. Her name's Violetta, and she's one of the bigger Web3 musicians. And she was actually on the X Factor over in Europe.
Mhm.
And it was a fascinating story because she talked about the dark side of these shows, right? Which is basically she didn't even win the thing. She was the top 3 artist, but she still got a deal, right? But it's like they own you. You have to make the music they want because they're trying to sell records. And she said, "Screw it all," and, way later on in life, found Web3 and now can make the music and the art that she wants to and use Web3 to pay for it, which is such a magical thing, right?
Does.
But again, to your point, if you're an artist, you really need to be able to explore and make what you want, which makes that community thing just that much harder. Um, Beautiful, man. Beautiful, beautiful insight. So, a couple questions from the community.
Mhm.
Anything else other than the Bitcoin ordinal launching about the future before we kind of wrap this up?
There's some projects coming out on Say that I'm doing special one-on-one pieces for, so I
Mm,
guess, you'll see all that when those announcements come out and they release it. There's a few Say projects that had reached out, and yeah, pretty much everyone that's reached out, I've created a piece for them, again, for free. I think that's going to end, though, now, the whole free aspect, because some of those are, like, paid mints and stuff, and
yeah.
you gotta value your own time. You gotta realize that your time is valuable, and to just give it away always is, I think, like a losing game, so,
In the beginning, it is helpful, like you said, though.
yes, definitely.
Um,
Definitely, I wouldn't do it any other way. Going back, I would have done it the same way. But, the ordinals thing coming out, and then, yeah, man, I'm just gonna keep rocking at this. I love doing it. I'm super passionate about it. Brings me a sense of happiness that I had lost with my other business.
yeah,
And, yeah, it's, like, reinvigorated me. So, I'm
I love
loving
it.
it, and, yeah, man, I'm gonna keep bringing my passion to it. So,
Yeah, I can
appreciate
tell that
everyone.
you well, like, when we first talked, I could tell, like, you were super into it and you were excited to talk about it, which is awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
2 questions from the audience. 1, caution tape, warning, tips. We kinda talked about this a little bit, but anything, uh, advice for somebody that does wanna start, let's say, art specifically in Web3, to avoid some of the downfalls or common downfalls you see?
Um I don't know if there's necessarily any way to avoid them. I think inevitably there's going to be issues and problems that come up. So I think it's just realizing that going into it, nothing's going to be perfect,
Right.
and just tackling it and realizing there's going to be bad days, but there's also going to be really good ones. And
Yeah.
in the end, it's all worth it. And if it's something you like and you're passionate about, trust me, it will be worth it to just push forward and keep working because inevitably it's going to make you a lot happier, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself on the journey too.
And then next one, other Web3 artists that you love, are into, excited about, anyone you want to share to check out for people to check out?
Yeah, I mean, X Copy, which I'm sure a lot of people have already heard of.
Yeah,
Claire Silver, Rupe Renasto. Um, besides Web3, I love Cause, Banksy. Those people are really like my main inspirations. But there's a ton of like amazing AI artists that I see all the time, and artists in general. Often I don't remember their names, unfortunately, but I
right.
see a lot of like great art all the time. Simply with his project that he made, Live 1111. His art has been fantastic, and sometimes you'll see stuff like his art or my art, and people think it's AI, and like, oh, it's easy to make or whatever.
It's
I
not.
challenge anyone to go try to make art like Simply's or like mine, like any other AI artist, and it's very hard to recreate that style.
Yeah, it's an art in itself, right? Understanding how to use the
Yeah.
programs. But just a random follow-up question to that, are there any particular places on the, internet that you go to find artists for inspiration, or is it really just crypto Twitter? Do you go to actual museums in real life? Like, what does that look like to you?
I do and I can. I love going to real life museums and looking at real art. I get to look at my mom's real art all the time, so that's the huge benefit of having a mom
Mhm.
mom that's an artist. Yeah, I love going to museums if I ever can, like in real life exhibitions. And as far as like, if anyone needs like tips or advice also on like creating AI art, like using AI as a medium, Midjourney on their Discord, there's tons of like group chats and help sections, and a
Right.
lot of artists just talk in there together. They also host like shows sometimes weekly, and there's like an actual tech chat where you can ask questions like about the different settings, and because really it gets like there's a lot to it. There's like a lot of settings, and there's different models that you can even use. For example, with Daydreams, when I created it, it was on 5.1 Midjourney. And when I started to work on my second art project, which was the ocean themed, which I had abandoned because I just didn't feel very passionate about it. But it's another story for another time. And in any case, I didn't realize that they had updated Midjourney. And so now there's a new version. And I can't get any of my outputs to look like how they looked originally. It's driving me crazy. I couldn't figure out why. And I go into like the tech chat and I'm like, did you guys update the version? They're like, yeah, you have to go like reset it back to the older version. I'm like, oh, thank God. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and there's and then you can technically, can't you run kind of AI programs on your own computer as well? Like, there's a whole 'nother world that
yep.
revolved around that as well, right?
Yeah, like
So
people creating it with algorithms or like
right.
generating the art on the spot when it's minted. But yeah, it gets pretty deep. It's a
Yeah,
deep rabbit hole.
yeah. Awesome. Well, a crazy, amazing conversation. Always wind it up with the last question. You probably heard this before, but you've been in spaces. You hosted a space yourself. Time on midlife crisis podcast compared to what you typically experience in the Web3 space. Love to hear it. Be critical. Give me feedback. I want all the juicy stuff.
I love it, man. I think it's a lot different because you actually deep dive into a lot of stuff. And something like leading up to this, I was telling my parents I was going to be on this podcast. So I was like, I'm actually really excited to talk to this guy though, because he not only seems to like care and be like passionate about what he's talking about, but he doesn't let people get away with like skirting around questions.
Right.
And like if someone's going too easy on, if they're going too quick through episode one, as you would call it, like you stop them. You're like, hold on. You can give me some more information there. And I love that because that's what makes a good show. It's what makes for good content. And people that have really started to open up, I've noticed. Like I've listened to like 3 or 4 or 5 of the last episodes that you've done. And I've seen it happen inevitably time and time again. Yeah,
Uh,
I think you do a really good job at it, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate you having
man.
me on. And I can't believe it's already been over 2 hours.
It's crazy. Like
Yeah.
when you're having fun, it goes by really quick. It means the world to me. Like that's exactly what we're going for. But I'd also say like that the product of getting to this point. I mean, thousands of hours I've been on
Mhm.
camera, right? So it's not always been so beautiful. Um, and I, in the beginning, I didn't have the courage to grade Trips and Salient as simply an F and tell them that they need to rewind here a little bit. I mean, I think Simply gave me like a 3-word answer about his episode
Really?
1, and I was like, "Hold on, buddy. We're gonna need to rewind here."
Like,
Because it is.
we got 2 hours to cover here, so
But it is inevitably, and I actually talk about this in my kind of like masterclass and kind of the education that I've been giving. And it's a universal principle, and it sounds so simple, but it's incredibly hard. And that is to just deeply listen, right?
Mhm.
And I deeply and I gen well, I think it's another thing of like we talked about is I just genuinely enjoy doing this. So like when you're talking, I am deeply listening and constantly thinking about how can I relate that to an experience I had, what's an appropriate follow-up question, and that only comes from really not being distracted by any of the other shit that goes on in life. Because I could be having this conversation and be thinking about something else, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But it deeply, and then of course that translates into I don't know if you're married, but I'm married or any intimate relationships, right? Like deeply listening and communication is at the crux of
Yeah,
pretty much everything else that you do in life.
yep.
Uh, and
Same with business too.
yeah, it sounds simple, but it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing that comes from it too is I think if you just make people feel appreciated, deeply listen, and come off genuine, you can do a lot of magical things. And one being talking for over 2 hours, and it felt like a half hour, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
literally.
which is really, really cool. So, dude,
Yeah.
thank you so much for the comments. I always like to close it out too with my comments. Uh, I love this, man. I felt like we just built a beautiful little friendship here online. I hope it continues. I can't wait to be a part of your community. I can't wait to continue to follow you. By the way, there's a lot of people. One of my OGs absolutely loved this conversation. He just followed you on Twitter.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, and so I'm actually excited for people to listen and to watch this in the future once we put it up on YouTube. You as a person, I can tell you're insanely genuine, um, and I always say this to most guests. It's not so much specific, but it is to you. Like you shared intimate details about your life, and that is very difficult. One, you're doing it live on the internet in front of a camera, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So having that courage is insanely amazing to me because that helps the podcast be better. Uh, Two, I would totally get on a plane and fly to Michigan just based off of this conversation.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
your girlfriend, if you have one at the time, can then see like, why is this random ginger bearded guy showing up at the house? It's because you're genuine and you're a good dude too. And
Appreciate that.
I'm excited for you to continue to take those risks. I love that you went down the ordinal rabbit hole. I think that's the right move. Open
Mhm.
yourself up to another community, try more, and then out of a lot, and like I said, I've had a lot of podcasts. Thank you for your lessons. I think you did an excellent job sharing some insights into successes, failures, and sharing those stories through a wide range of experiences. So thank you for that. I think that was really impactful, and I think we're gonna have some really nice short form content that we can share. And I don't know if I told you this, but like I firmly believe a product of this podcast will be something that I experienced. I was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, probably a month ago now. That DSK DAO project that I mentioned. This guy Blue, fantastic guy. I should link you up because he does a lot of his artwork through AI as well.
Oh, nice.
But someone listened to the podcast and they made a comment of like, hey, they suffer from drugs and alcohol, and you guys just seem like really good guys. I just randomly found you live, and like I'm happy to know you. And if you would have been
That's
in my life, maybe things could have been different. Um, and I'm excited to follow you in the future. I truly do think people watching this and then watching future short form clips of your advice, you can really impact people. So I thank you for that, man.
that's awesome. Thank you, man. I appreciate that because, you know, you never really know how you do when it's live. And I typically always go back and listen to like my spaces, and of course the show, I'll go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
So I hope it sounds like good because, you know, I can sometimes like feel myself not exactly like being as fluent as I want to, but I appreciate the kind words, man. And it really was a great time. And I can tell you're passionate about what you do and you enjoy it. And that makes all the difference in the world. So
Yeah, thanks, man. And I really do. And honestly, my biggest compliment to you is I'm usually pretty good at like staying to my episodes, but
mhm.
I was so fascinated in what you were talking. I let you distract me a couple times. So
Yeah.
that's a huge testament into you did a hell of a bang up job because I just let it go because it
Nice.
was such a great conversation. So
Nice. Thank you, man.
yeah, man, and we are friendship is born, another
Yeah.
say one in the books.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
Everybody
might be coming to see you in, California instead of you to Michigan. I mean, you got the sun out there, so
always welcome in San Diego, man.
awesome. I might
All
take
right,
you up on
I
it one
gotta
day.
get going. My wife just came in and gave me the death stare. I am in trouble. I gotta get going. I love you all. We will be back next week. Please follow Mikey G NFT. Follow Sold1. His link is Twitter link is in the chat. Follow Sold1 and follow us on YouTube. We are coming back. We will be around for the next week. Twitter Spaces are starting. We love you all. Mikey G and Sold1 are out.
Peace.